My name's Carrie Lombardo, and I'm the Strategic and External Affairs Officer for MERS. Before introducing our panelists today, I'd like to share a story with you. Recently, one of our service center representatives took a call from a participant that was ready to begin the retirement process. As we helped her, she shared that she was so excited. She had over $100,000 in her account, and she was ready to retire. As we helped her through the process, we realized that with her current salary at $35,000 and anticipating that she would need 80% of that in retirement, we gently pointed out to her that her $100,000 account balance, along with Social Security, would likely last her less than 6 years. So that was pretty sobering for her. She was very excited, and then she realized that she may not be able to retire at this time. Now, each one of us has our own unique financial story. In financial wellness, what we're here to talk about today, it's not a feel-good buzzword. It means giving people the skills and knowledge so that they can achieve their own lifestyles and goals. It's more than being prepared for retirement. It means more than repairing bad credit or managing debt. Financial wellness truly can change lives. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that 70% of us are living paycheck to paycheck, regardless of income. 70% regardless of income. So that means giving people more money won't necessarily solve the problem. Few of us received financial education in school. In fact, most of us learn our financial skills from our parents. And many parents lack the confidence in their own financial knowledge. And so this cycle of poor financial behavior continues. In fact, according to a recent CNBC poll, 33% of baby boomers have less than $25,000 saved for retirement. 66% of millennials have nothing saved. Now, most of us here today, we have access to a retirement plan, but we know friends, family, that they don't have access. And even those of us with retirement plans, there are many of us that aren't engaged in saving for retirement. Together, as a community, as we study this situation of financial wellness and we learn and we advance our own knowledge, I believe that together as a community, we can fix this for future generations. So in studying the situation, I'm excited to introduce our panel today, who has great research on the situation today of financial wellness. And so I'd like to begin by introducing our panelists. There we go. We have with us today Diane Oakley, the Executive Director of the National Institute on Retirement Security, Sarah Gill, Senior Legislative Representative from AARP, and Jennifer Malzoff, Retirement Strategies and Communications Director for MERS. And now we'll begin reviewing the research on millennials to those closing in on retirement, and then we'll talk about how we may address the situation going forward. And I'll begin with Diane.
Thank you, Carrie, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be here from Washington, and I'm here to help you. I know you hear that, and it usually gets a laugh somewhere, so I appreciate that. But actually, we are here to help. What I want to talk about is some research that we just published earlier this year. We've heard a lot about millennials, and I mean, everybody's heard about avocado toast, and what are they spending their money on? They're not buying houses, they're not buying cars. But you know what? They want to save for retirement. So let me tell you what's holding them back a little bit. We actually did some research using a huge database published by the federal government. So we have good data, and what it shows us is that The bars here, the green bar is millennials, the yellow bar is Gen X, and the gray bar, nothing personal, is, because I'm a boomer, is the boomers. I didn't realize we did that until I just said that, so I'm going to have to talk to my design folks. So anyway, the millennials are working at employers who offer retirement plans at the same rate as Gen Xers and baby boomers. So then when you look at the participation, which is on the other side of this slide, they are only about 1/3 of them participating in a retirement plan, but about half of baby boomers and about half of Gen Xers are participating in a workplace retirement plan. What's causing that difference? And when we looked at it, it was the eligibility. Baby boomers and Gen Xers, about 3/4 of them are eligible for their employer's plan. But when we looked at millennials, only 55% were eligible for the plan being offered through their employer. And why? So then this survey also asked some questions of everyone. Why aren't you saving? And this is that second one. Why did you not save? For millennials, it was they were not eligible because they didn't work enough hours. And we also know that about 1/4 of millennials are part-time workers in the data. And then the second thing was, I haven't worked long enough. So this is how long have you been with your employer? Most employers have a waiting period, especially in the private sector, not so much in the public sector. Public sector, you come on board, you're in a retirement plan, whichever type of retirement plan you have, you usually start from day one. Private sector, you need sometimes to be there for a year, sometimes it's even 2 years, and up to 3. So they hadn't worked there long enough. It wasn't so much that they couldn't afford to save, they couldn't even get to that question because they weren't eligible. And so that translates into the fact that really only 1/3 of baby boomers have anything saved for retirement in retirement accounts. And 2/3 have nothing saved. And then the other piece of it is, for those who are saving, when we look at their savings, we see a huge disparity between the median, which is, where is that person right at the middle of the group of millennials who are saving? They've got about $19,000 saved. Where is the average? And the average is $68,000 roughly. So there's some really, even among millennials, we often hear about, income disparity. We're already seeing wealth disparity in terms of retirement savings among millennials. Why does that happen? And then again, this slide is just a slide of, for those millennials who are saving, how much are they saving, including their employer match? And so what we end up, if you look at some of the financial recommendations from organizations like Fidelity and others, they would say that individuals today have to start saving in their early 20s, build up to get to 15% pretty quickly by the time they're 30, and then start to save about 15% of their pay for the rest of their lives until they turn 67. And right now, about 14% of the millennials who are saving 15% or more. But it's important to remember, since 2/3 of them aren't saving, only 5% of millennials are saving at the right amount that they need to continue to save for the rest of their careers. And then the other issue really is, one of the things we know about defined benefit plans is that, if you come to an employer a little later in your career, the plan kind of catches you up because your benefits are based on your years of service, your salary, and it might be more expensive to have them in your plan, but it is a big help to the wellness of the employee to come later in their career and be covered by a DB plan. In a DC plan, compound interest, just as it does in the funding of your DB plan, makes a huge amount of difference. And so if you don't start in a retirement plan when you were younger, trying to catch up cost a lot of money in terms of that. So if you were to look at someone, and it's probably hard for you to read this chart, but excuse me, if you look at a male who is age 20, and if they start to save for retirement and they get a 3% real rate of return, they actually can save much less than the person who starts 20 years later. They only need to save 11.9%. If they wait and don't do it and then only have 20 years at the end of their career to save for retirement, they actually have to save 27%, more than 1/4, more than what most people pay for their houses, almost, in some cases, at that age. So it's a very difficult thing to do to catch up, and that's, again, with a pretty reasonable real rate of return. So I've got a couple of slides here that just sum up everything, and you can have that. I don't know if you get that in your materials, but maybe just for time, I'm going to pass it on to Sarah, who's going to talk about her points.
Great, thanks, Diane. Can everybody, where do I go? Are we on now? Interesting. There we go. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. I'm Sarah Gill with ARP, and talk a little bit about the financial insecurity crisis, but thankfully, I'm also going to talk a little bit about solutions, because I find this to be kind of a depressing conversation, so let's lift it up a little bit. So the risk of financial insecurity in retirement has been growing. I think most folks in this room are familiar with that. In 1982, 83, roughly 1 out of every 3 households was at risk for financial insecurity. Now it's 1 out of every 2 households. And again, that's with most households that are boomers having access to pensions and 401ks. Again, this is probably very small to read, but it's interesting data that's Michigan specific. And the data is about private sector workers and how many workers have access to a payroll deduction 401k or retirement program. Roughly 1.7 million people across the state of Michigan don't have access. And that's really important because what we know is that people are 15 times more likely to save for retirement if they can do so out of their regular everyday paycheck. So what does it add up to? At ARP, we have an unfortunate joke, which is that the new word for retirement is work. What we know is that people are working longer, and it's not necessarily because they want to be working longer. So in fact, in 2022, I believe, 65 to 74-year-olds, about 30+% of that age cohort is going to be working. And the 75+ cohort, that's about 11% of them will be working in retirement. So what are we doing about it? The first thing I'd like to share is a little bit about our financial security campaign, our education and outreach, because we think it's a vital component to any kind of financial wellness package. So we are doing something called Ace Your Retirement. And you can see on the screen there's a little bit about our targeting and our specifics, but I think the most important thing here to share is the call to action and the messaging. We found in our polling that the most important thing you can do is say, you can do this, you've got it. You helped your kids save for college, you used a 529 plan, you bought your own house, you took that initiative. So let's use that same kind of can-do attitude with retirement. That's what we find really works. And we created an app with a little widget where you can go in and put your information, and what it does is break down retirement planning into small pieces, and it gives you 3 or 4 things that you can do immediately to help your retirement planning in the future. And if you'd like to see more, go to aceyourretirement.org. And this is, my realm is more on legislation. So I work with states across the country to help pass what we call Work and Save, but it goes by many names: Auto IRA, Secure Choice. Basically, it's kind of like a college savings plan, like a 529 plan, but for retirement. And it's for small business owners who are busy keeping their doors open, don't have an HR department, feel uncomfortable setting up their own 401k. And as I mentioned, the reason we're doing this is because over the past 30+ years, we have not seen any real shift in the number of people who have access to retirement plans out of their regular paycheck. That's stayed the same since ERISA was passed in the 1970s. And again, the important part here is, can people go out on their own and open an IRA? Absolutely you can, any day of the week. But what we know is that only 5% of people without access will go out on their own and open an IRA. That's because of behavioral economics, automatic enrollment, automatic escalation, decumulation. Those are really important features that we find seriously change the behavior of individuals that are planning for retirement. And again, people are 15 times more likely to save with access to payroll deduction. That bumps up to 20 times more likely to save with access to automatic, with opt-out rather than opt-in, with auto enrollment. Again, this is a nationwide movement. Lots of states are considering it. There's a continuum from studying the problem all the way to setting up a 529 style program. But as you can see, the green states here are all the states that have considered this or considered financial wellness in some form or fashion. And this is just a little bit about how an auto IRA or work and save program could work. So there are many different ways to go about it, but essentially, let's take, for instance, the state of Illinois, which has set up a program where businesses that have 25 or more employees that have been around for 2 years or more have to offer their workforce a way to save out of their paycheck. They can use the state program, that 529 style program, or they can go out on their own and open a 401k or any other style of retirement program to fulfill that requirement. But essentially, businesses that have been around for a while need to offer something through payroll deduction. And here's a little bit of national context as I shared. This is a bipartisan movement that's happening throughout the country. It really knows no bounds. But I think the benefit here is that states can set up programs that fit their population, because what works in California isn't going to work in Texas and vice versa. So we know that these options are really important, and we want to make sure that states set up a program that works for them. Go.
Thank you. So as Diane and Sarah were just saying, I think the statistics are very clear. As Americans, many of us are not financially prepared for retirement. And financial wellness isn't just about creating a plan. It's also about understanding what actions you have to take in order to be better financially prepared. And as Carrie was saying, these are lessons that may not be taught to us. So whether they're talking about goal planning, budgeting, or actually just talking about compounding interest, these are topics that we need to share and learn more about. At MERS, we see financial wellness as a path towards retirement readiness. Thus, it's important for us to understand where our participants are at. In May of this year, we collected data from 12 different employers and participants across the state in our annual Voice of the Customer survey that Chris mentioned this morning. We take this data and input very seriously, as it helps us determine and create our educational programs for our customers. So taking a step back, this is a look at our active population. We have 65,000 active participants across the state of Michigan. In Generation Z, or the Centennials, these are those that are aged 22 and under. Millennials are ages 22 to 37. Gen X are those 38 to 53. The Boomers are 54 to 76. And the silent generation are those over 76. So there are 89 active employees that are over the age of 76 in a workforce potentially with those under the age of 20. That's a large span of different topics to cover at one employer. Our data shows that generally our participants feel like they're doing a good job preparing for retirement, with 67% of them reporting that, yeah, I feel like I'm doing a good job. And that retirement confidence grows as they get closer to retirement, which is a really good thing. However, behavioral finance theories tell us people tend to be overly confident when they think about their finances. And while confidence can be really beneficial to you, overconfidence can be detrimental. Only 14% of participants surveyed have a plan for retirement. In fact, in that previous graph that I was showing you, only 68% of participants have a plan within 1 year of retirement, even though 92% of them feel like they're doing a good job. Now let's take a look at what our data shares compared to the national averages. We compared our data to the Employee Benefits Research Institute of a Retirement Confidence Survey. And what you can see is MERS participants are ahead of the national average when it comes to two important planning categories: preparing a formal written plan and estimating how much they will need in retirement. And some of this may have to do with the fact that MERS does offer free online tools for participants to go online and start planning for their retirement. While we are ahead in some areas, there's much work to be done with everyone. What this chart is showing you is the breakdown based on generation. And again, you can see there's a lot of work to do, especially as we talk about the millennial generation. And that's very akin to what Diane was just talking about in access to the plans, eligibility, and really encouraging that cohort to save more. Since targeting this individual group will be so key to helping them plan for retirement, we took a dive into what participants want to learn by their age. What this chart is showing you is, again, on active employees, the topics that are most important to them. So budgeting was the top topic for ages 18 to 24. It dips down in priority and then rises back up for those 65 plus. Managing day-to-day expenses, again, has a very similar trend, but kind of plateaus at the 55 age population. Building an emergency fund comes in as the third priority for the younger employees, and then actually rises in priority for those 35 to 44. Debt management came in a bit lower than I would have expected, especially seeing Bloomberg just reported that Americans' credit card debt just reached $13 trillion. Now, some of this could be a sense of embarrassment. People tend to be afraid of their finances or their credit card debt. Another thing could be is self-deception. They may not understand that they are in debt in what extreme and how much they will need to pay to take those off. Student loans also had a really interesting pattern here. It rises in age for 25 to 34-year-olds, which is the age participants enter the workforce many times after college. But what's really interesting is that rise you see in the age 65-year-olds. NBC reported earlier this year that there is a significant rise in older students in college classrooms. They cited several reasons for this, including those employees going back to work, trying to gain new skill sets to return to the workforce. And that's very similar to, again, what Diane was saying, that many people are finding themselves out of retirement prior to when they were actually planning, and now we're looking to go back. And the last topic is saving for my child's education, which also has a pattern, as you would expect, raising in importance for those 25 to 34-year-olds. Next, we asked our employers, what are the benefits of having a financially well workforce? And the top 3 reasons actually had to do with improved understanding of benefits, increased satisfaction of benefits, and overall reduced employee stress. This is an interesting slide. Since 2015, we've been asking employers the question about recruitment and retention. Is this an issue? Is it starting to become a problem, or is it a significant problem? What you can see in this chart is in 2015, 33% of employers indicated that it's starting to become a problem to recruit and retain employees, and that number grew to 44% in 2018. Those reporting that it was becoming a significant problem was 5% in 2015 and rose to 9% in 2018. So what types of actions are employers doing? Well, the top 3 things our employers are doing and are considering doing in the future is offering on-site education to employees on financial wellness, offering a 457 supplemental savings program, and a healthcare savings program. But one of the actions that I find interesting that employers aren't considering is automatic enrollment into these programs and auto-escalation of contributions. Compare that to the 17% of participants who say the only reason they're not saving more for retirement is because they just haven't gotten around to doing it. And I think that's so much of what we see. So if we can make the program defaults the right choices, in these cases, if those 17% of participants were an employer with automatic enrollment, you would see them already saving more.
All right, thank you. So the financial situation for millennials retiring appears quite challenging. What can we learn from baby boomers and generations before them?
Let me start and share some things that I think are really interesting, especially in Michigan, as a microcosm of the United States. Michigan has the highest level of retirees who are covered by a defined benefit plan among any of the states. Roughly 56% of retirees in Michigan are covered by a defined benefit plan, either through their own employer or their spouses. So they have that security of lifetime income in a retirement plan. But at the same time, when we look at Michigan in terms of what's going on in terms of individuals and saving, we're seeing nationally a lot of private sector employers have moved away from defined benefit plans. Michigan as a state employer has moved away, and a number of the municipalities have done that as well. But then we start to look at, well, what's going on in the DC side? Are we seeing increases in that? And interestingly, we're not. We did a study a couple of years ago, and there's sheets on our website for every state. You can go to a map and click on Michigan. And what you'll find is if you go back to 2000, our rating system had Michigan getting a 7. Some of the highest rates, because nobody has a 10. The highest rate's a 9. So 7 and 8 is sort of the next highest level. Michigan was in that level in 2000. By 2012, it had fallen down to 4 as its rating. So it had actually gone in coverage, participation in DC plans from 55% to 45%. So today only 45% of workers in Michigan participate in a DC plan, and the roughly average account balance in those plans is equal to about 1/2 their times their salary. Now, that's not bad if you're a millennial. But the problem is that goes across all age brackets, and so we've got a lot of individuals at older ages covered by defined contribution plans. And I think what we hear often, especially from retirees, there's data out there that says 50% of individuals who are retired, and this comes from that EBRI survey, say that they retired sooner than they expected. So we're hearing people say, oh, I'm not going to retire until 73. But they're planning on that, and then if they have to retire in their early or mid-60s, they're just not going to be ready, and they're going to have to move into a lower standard of living after they pay for health care and other things. So I think those are one of the real important lessons I would say is you got to plan for the unexpected, and nobody's doing that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I would also say, to Jen's earlier point, making the easy way the right way is really important. So what we know, part of the reason why defined benefit plans work is because they're set up in a way that the quote-unquote defaults make sense, right? So when we see 401k plans today, we need to make sure that they have these good features like automatic enrollment, like automatic escalation, and that the defaults are great. In fact, one survey I saw in Connecticut compared whether or not a 6% default versus a 3% default would encourage people to leave their 401k plan. And what they found was it was exactly the same to individual participants. So I think using good data to make easy and right choices is really important.
Just to add to that, I think there's a lot of stories, as Carrie started out, that we are sharing, and we're hearing that across the state from our customers, that sometimes at a group, there's somebody that is that champion, that has experience, that is sharing with the younger employees, hey, you need to be saving more, or consider a percentage of pay, and that way you won't feel it as much, or those little tidbits of advice. And I think what we're finding with those are some of the best success stories we see, is when there is someone at that municipality that is the champion. So what we're looking to do is try to connect people more, whether it's through social media and sharing stories that way, or also we're considering a champion program to help those employees advocate for retirement, financial wellness topics, really kind of give them the tools to help educate the younger workforce as well.
So the research shows a large gap in access, not just in savings, but in access. So why should employers care about financial wellness?
I think what we've seen, I go across the country and I talk to small employers in different states every day. And what I see anecdotally, but even more so in surveys, is that employers consider their workforce family. They may not know what the best approach is moving forward about how to set up a 401k, but they know they want to do it. And we see 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 employers across party lines saying that they want to do more to be able to offer a retirement program. They also tell me that this is vital for recruitment and retention. I mean, we saw the statistics earlier, and I'll say, given the economic environment right now, recruitment and retention has become even more important than it was several years ago.
You know, I would add to that too. When MERS has done public opinion surveys, and we started a couple of sessions ago asking, what are these job criteria and what do they mean to you? How important are they? What really was phenomenally interesting is when we looked at the data that came in from public sector and private sector, and I think this, for this audience, particularly important, there was a distinct contrast between how they felt about salary and retirement. The public sector employees rated retirement, 88% of them, as being extremely or very important. They rated salary about 62% as extremely or very important. In the private sector, it was the reverse, not as much as the magnitudes. About 82% rated salary as extremely or very important, and only 62%, or somewhere in there, rated retirement as very important. So it's very important, I think, to understand who your workforce is and what are key components of their compensation so that you can take those compensation dollars, be it salary or benefits, and spend them in the most effective way to respond to what your employees feel is important to them.
I'd just add to that our data is very clear. There's more growth in participant-directed accounts with the defined contribution plan, also the healthcare savings. And with those programs, participants need to take action. And in order to get them to take action, employers and participants alike have to work together to get engagement. And so whether it's offering on-site education, consistent reminders and payroll flyers, pairing it with maybe your open enrollment during healthcare, but the topic of financial wellness is critical in order to set up success in these type of programs.
Sarah, the AARP data very much supports that 40 is the new 60. People are working longer. What are other considerations that we should all be thinking about?
That's a great question. So, as you know, folks in this room, I'm sure the average 65-year-old today can expect to live for an additional 2 decades. And I'm a millennial, and when I talk to financial planners, what they say to me is, you should be planning to live past 100. That's really daunting to think that you could have so many years in retirement or even just financial years to plan for. So, and when we talk to individuals, what they say is 20% of retirees who are working some kind of part-time job or job in retirement say to us they expect never to retire. That's clear that there's a disconnect there because they may feel financially secure or they may feel like they can work in retirement forever, but what we know is that's just not true. So I think, first of all, folks should be aware that there is some discrimination amongst hiring older workers. We find a lot that if you lose your job in your early 60s, it is far harder to find another job. Also, I think the big thing for us is planning for medical costs, planning for healthcare. So long-term care is a huge nut that we have not well cracked yet. Additionally, our data shows that Medicare would only cover roughly 50% or less of healthcare costs in retirement, especially for nursing home care. So we really encourage folks to think about healthcare as early as possible.
I think that's just to key into what Sarah just said. As part of that retirement survey that MERS does, we said, what are the issues that you worry about when it comes to retirement security? And a couple of years ago, we added the cost of long-term care. And what totally floored me was we put that on there, and the first year it went to the #1 concern. In other words, what made it difficult for people to plan? And they said, we can't anticipate and figure out how to pay for long-term care. And I think that's an issue we have across this country. And the reason what most people probably do is, well, I can't plan for it, so I'm not going to do it. And again, I don't know that there's, even though it's been around for a while, there's not really good markets to do some of that. So too often we're left with that, we spend down our assets and rely on the government programs. But I do think, the ability to understand, I may be able to work, I may not. Even here in Michigan, one of the issues that pushed things down a little bit was we looked at the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate for older workers over age 55 was significantly higher than the national average. And again, I think you see that in some of your communities. So those are things sometimes we just don't have the control over.
So what should participants focus on? In what order should they tackle these issues, Jen?
It's a really good question. For us in this room, we have access to retirement plans. And so that box is checked there. But as we take a look, there is an order we would recommend. And we think about financial wellness is very daunting. So breaking things up into smaller bite-sized pieces, having actionable steps people can take kind of go a long way in putting someone on the right path. So first is to address those day-to-day spending, understanding where is it that your money is going, and understanding how much you're spending in various categories. Then once you understand that and we're learning to spend within our means, understanding what a budget would actually look like for yourself. Do you have a plan for where that money is going to go versus just kind of wondering where it all went? Next would be to look at debt management. And again, whether that's credit card debt, student loans, or other kinds of debt, having a meaningful way to pay that down. It doesn't mean you're going to be debt-free. It means that you have an action plan and you have a way that you're going to see the light at the end of that tunnel. Creating an emergency fund is also critical because, as Diane was saying earlier, with many of us living day-to-day in paychecks, not being able to absorb a financial shock, whether it's your car breaking down, unexpected medical bills, those types of things, having an emergency savings is critical to staying out of debt. And then finally, once those pieces are in place, creating that plan for the future. Having conversations with those in your family. What are your goals? What do you want to achieve? And then how are you going to get there?
Let me add to that with just a little story. When I went in to buy my iPad, I was, made with the thing, and then I'm waiting with the young sales guy for my iPad to come. And so he's talking me up a little bit. Oh, what do you do? Oh, I work in retirement. Oh, my mom has a 401k, but she doesn't have much money in it. She's only got $25,000. And I'm thinking, boy, she's better than a lot of other people. But he was concerned, and I was really pleased to hear him say that. So I said to him, well, do you have a 401k here for you? And he said, yeah, but I'm not in it. And I'm like, well, why aren't you in the 401k plan? And he said, well, I'm trying to pay off my student loans first because my mother co-signed for my student loans. And I don't want something to happen to me and have her have that debt. And I'm thinking okay, I love the fact that you're concerned about your mom, but you know what? You can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can save for retirement and pay off your student loans. That might mean using something like consolidating some of that student loan debt. It might mean using the government, the program where you can pay it back as a percentage of your income. You can also then start to put 5% of your income to pay for your student loans. You can put 5% more maybe in your 457 plan. And you end up in the better spot. The reality of it is, it makes sense to borrow money to get a college education because that improves your human capital. Nobody is really going to lend you money in an advantageous situation for retirement. You might be able to do a reverse mortgage, but there's a lot of things about those things that a lot of people aren't comfortable with. So, think about the need to be able to walk and chew gum, to save and pay down your debts at the same time. It's really important.
We often hear that Social Security will not be available. Does AARP give advice to participants on how you should include Social Security in your plan?
I get that question all the time, especially from millennials who say, oh, you're funny, I'm not going to get Social Security, that's not going to happen. And as much as I would love to just introduce them to our tenacious lobbyists who work to make sure Social Security is there every day, what I do is ply them with facts. And I think the most important fact is that full benefits can be paid in Social Security for the next 15 years. So if you are in your already retirement phase, it's not something I would necessarily worry greatly about. then the piece that fewer people understand is that it's not that in 2034 benefits go away. It's that 75% of benefits will likely be able to be paid. That's a huge cut, no doubt about it. But that doesn't mean Social Security is going to disappear. So it should certainly be part of your retirement planning. But again, we always say this is a piece of the three-legged stool. It was never meant to encompass your entire retirement. It was always meant to be a supplement, and it frankly was never meant for a generation that was expected to live 20 or 30 years in retirement.
So what would be the key takeaways that you would want our audience to walk away with today from this discussion?
You know, we have, as a nation, a retirement crisis, and Americans understand that. Each of us can learn, and the reality of it is, if you look at some of the surveys, most people will say they take maybe 4 hours a year to look at their retirement situation. We need to spend a little bit more time. We need to put things on autopilot. You know, the defined benefit plans were the first autopilots of retirement. Everything was taken care of for you. You know, today we've asked individuals to become their own investment advisor. When they get close to retirement, they got to become their own actuary. They got to figure out how long their money's going to need to last, how much it's going to cost for health care. All of these things are complex, but they can be mastered, and there are some easy ways to do that. As Sarah said, I think we all have to start putting some pressure too on we have to fix Social Security. It's important. It's one of the things we put in that millennial paper. When we look at millennials and we look at everyone else, nobody's really prepared. And the reality of it is, when we look at the data, once someone stops working, Social Security is the primary source of income for more than 75% of the households in this country. So it really is so critical that we start to look at fixing that program.
I definitely agree with everything I've heard so far. I would say that there's two important pieces here. The first is financial wellness and thinking about financial security, beefing up our education, talking about these problems, sitting down and really thinking about it, and sharing information across generations. But I always say that financial security information is necessary, but it's not sufficient. What we need to do is make sure that the easy way is the right way, and that our benefit structures are all set up so that people can't help but do the right thing, do the thing that's good for them. So that means choosing automatic enrollment, choosing default amounts and default accounts that make sense, that are low in fee, high enough in terms of contributions, and that we really think about decumulation. You know, for folks who have DB plans, that's part of what makes them so attractive and so useful, is that it's income you can't outlive. But it's also income that comes in monthly bites that they know exactly how much they're going to get and exactly what they can plan around. And so we need to help people who have 401k style plans be able to figure out how to decumulate in a safe and advantageous way.
And my key takeaway would be that although MERS is ahead of the national average in terms of planning and getting people engaged, there's still a lot of work to do. And as we shift towards these participant-directed accounts, engaging, having the skill set, and taking actions are going to be critical. The more we can share stories, bring things back from this conference to our workforces, encourage people to sit in on a webinar, encourage them to talk to others about financial wellness, it's something we can all do together. We can take small steps, and we can do this, in Sarah's phrase here.
Thank you. So as we've discussed, financial wellness and planning for retirement is critical, no matter what stage of life you're in, no matter what your age is. I encourage each of you to learn more to ensure not only the financial security of yourself, but future generations. On behalf of our audience, I thank you, panelists, for a great discussion. Thank you for sharing your research.